Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
The smell of motor oil and grease was a constant in Mario's life. The hum of the garage was comforting, a stark contrast to the chaos at home. For the past 12 years, he had built a life with Grace. The early years had been great, even. They laughed, dreamed, and made plans together. Ricardo was born during those golden years, and Mario felt like life couldn't get any better. But life has a way of taking unexpected turns. It started gradually. Grace became irritable, her words sharper. At first, Mario thought it was just stress, maybe a rough patch. But as months turned into years, her negativity became a daily storm cloud over their home. Mario tried everything: flowers, date nights, listening without judgment. But nothing seemed to ease the tension. She would lash out over the smallest things: a tool left on the kitchen counter, a late return from the garage, or even Ricardo's playful messes. "Do you even care about this family, Mario?" she'd yell, her voice echoing through the house. Mario endured her words in silence most of the time. He didn't want Ricardo to see them fighting. Instead, he poured his love and energy into his son. Ricardo was his light, a reminder of better days. They'd spend hours tinkering with Mario's old truck, playing soccer in the backyard, or just talking about life. Ricardo adored his father and often asked him, "Dad, why is Mom so mad all the time?" Mario never had an answer. The situation took a serious turn last year when Grace fainted in the kitchen. Mario rushed her to the hospital, heart pounding in fear. After hours of tests, the doctor delivered grim news. Grace had developed a heart condition. The doctor explained that stress and negativity were major contributors and urged Grace to adopt a more positive outlook. "It's not just about medication, Mrs. Gonzalez," the doctor said firmly. "You need to make lifestyle changes, both physically and mentally. Let go of the negativity. It's harming your heart and your family." For a moment, Mario saw a flicker of vulnerability in Grace's eyes. She nodded quietly, but as the weeks passed, little changed. She would try. Mario could see that, but her anger and frustration always bubbled back to the surface. Mario tried to help her, encouraging her to find hobbies, see a counselor, or even join him and Ricardo for their backyard games. But Grace seemed trapped in her own cycle of resentment. Mario often found himself alone in the garage late at night, staring at an old photo of the three of them from a happier time. Ricardo was just a toddler in the picture, his tiny hands clutching Mario's shirt as Grace laughed beside them. That laughter felt like a lifetime ago. He loved Grace, he truly did, but he couldn't deny the toll her negativity was taking on their family. There were moments when he felt helpless, caught between his love for his wife and the need to protect Ricardo from the toxicity at home. He worried about how this environment would shape his son. One evening, as Mario tucked Ricardo into bed, his son looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Dad," Ricardo whispered, "do you think Mom will ever be happy again?" Mario's chest tightened. He forced a smile and kissed Ricardo's forehead. "I hope so, Mijo. I really hope so." But deep down, Mario wasn't sure. He could fix engines, rebuild transmissions, and diagnose the trickiest car problems, but he didn't know how to fix Grace, or if she even wanted to be fixed. All he knew was that he had to keep going, for Ricardo's sake. He'd keep showing up at the garage, finding solace in the rhythm of his work, and he'd keep being the father Ricardo needed. But as for Grace, Mario could only pray that one day, she'd choose to let go of her anger and embrace the love that still surrounded her. Doctor called Mario a week later for discussing Grace's condition. "Her condition is a bit more serious than what we think. She needs to start taking extra care, and you need to make sure that she does not get sudden shocks that may be fatal for her. Exactly why I asked you to come alone for her reports." Mario had barely settled into his routine after the doctor's grim warning about Grace's heart condition. The weight of her fragile health and the doctor's advice to avoid shocking her hung heavy on his mind. As he drove home that evening, he rehearsed how he would approach Grace with kindness, hoping they could find a way to navigate her condition together. The sun was setting as he pulled into the driveway. The house was unusually quiet when he stepped inside, but the living room lights were on. Grace was sitting on the couch, her posture stiff. Across from her, with a smug expression on his face, sat Jose, Mario's boss. Mario frowned, sensing something was off. "Grace? Jose, what's going on?" Grace stood up, crossing her arms as if preparing for battle. Her voice was sharp but steady. "Mario, sit down. We need to talk." Mario didn't sit. He felt his chest tighten. "What's this about?" Grace took a deep breath, her expression hardening. "I filed for divorce. I'm leaving you." The words hit Mario like a freight train. He blinked, trying to process what she had just said. What? I'm leaving you, Mario, she repeated, her tone cold and resolute. I've been seeing Jose for a while now. He's financially stable, successful, and he can give me the life I deserve. Also, he is better than you in bed. Mario stared at her, stunned into silence. Jose leaned back in the chair, his lips curling into a smirk. Grace continued, as if she were trying to justify herself. I didn't want to hurt you anymore. That's why I'm telling you now, so you can move on. Mario's shock quickly morphed into a simmering anger. He chuckled bitterly, shaking his head. You didn't want to hurt me anymore? Well, Grace, that's real noble of you. You're practically a saint. Maybe the Vatican should canonize you. Grace glared at him, her expression darkening. Don't be sarcastic, Mario. I'm trying to do this the right way. Mario's gaze shifted to Jose, who was leaning forward now, as if eager to see how Mario would react. Mario smiled, a sharp, humorless grin. Jose, congratulations, man. You're getting a real gem here. Good luck. You're going to need it. Jose opened his mouth to speak, but Mario raised a hand, cutting him off. He turned back to Grace, his tone now icy and deliberate. You want to marry Jose? Fine. But here's the deal. No alimony. And I get full custody of Ricardo. No negotiations. Grace's eyes widened, and for a moment, she hesitated. Full custody? Yes, Mario said firmly. You want a new life with Jose? Go ahead. But Ricardo stays with me. You're the one walking out on this family. You don't get to drag him into your mess. Mario sat across from his lawyer, frustration etched on his face. She wants alimony and custody of Ricardo, he said, his voice tinged with disbelief. She cheats on me, tears apart our family, and now she wants to take my son? Over my dead body. His lawyer, a seasoned professional named Sarah, nodded sympathetically. We'll fight this, Mario. The court doesn't look kindly on infidelity, especially when it's openly admitted. But we need to prepare for a long battle. Mario clenched his fists. He didn't care about Grace anymore, not after everything she'd done. But Ricardo? That was different. Ricardo was his world, and Mario would do whatever it took to protect him. The courtroom battles began shortly after. Grace was relentless, insisting on alimony and custody of Ricardo. Mario, on the other hand, wasn't going to make this easy. He filed motions to delay the proceedings and requested marriage counseling as a last-ditch effort. Not because he wanted to save their marriage, but because he wanted to drag the case out as long as possible. Grace was furious when she learned about the counseling request. You don't even want to fix this marriage, Mario, she hissed during one of their court-mandated sessions. Mario leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. You're right, Grace. I don't. But the court thinks we should try, so here we are. Maybe it's time you took responsibility for your actions instead of running away to Jose. The counselor, a calm woman named Dr. Patel, tried to mediate. Grace, this is a safe space. If there's anything you'd like to share, now is the time. Grace hesitated, her gaze darting between Mario and Dr. Patel. Finally, she blurted out, I'm cheating on him, okay? I've been with Jose for months, and I don't regret it. Mario and I are over. Mario's heart clenched, not because of the revelation. It wasn't news to him, but because of the callousness in her voice. Dr. Patel nodded solemnly, jotting down notes. Thank you for your honesty, Grace. I'll include this in my report to the court. Grace's face paled. Wait, you're telling the judge? Dr. Patel nodded. I'm required to submit an unbiased report based on these sessions. The judge will review it as part of the case. Mario fought the urge to smirk. This was exactly the kind of ammunition he needed. The judge, a stern man with a deep voice, looked down at Grace from his bench. Mrs. Gonzalez, I've reviewed the counseling report. Admitting to infidelity while seeking custody and financial support does not paint you in the best light. Your actions have disrupted this family, and you've shown little regard for the well-being of your husband and child. Grace looked down, biting her lip. Mario's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, my client is willing to grant a divorce on the condition that there is no alimony and that he is awarded full custody of Ricardo. The judge glanced at Mario, then back at Grace. Mrs. Gonzalez, do you have anything to say? Grace lifted her chin, defiance flashing in her eyes. Ricardo is my son. He belongs with me. I won't let Mario take him from me. The judge sighed, rubbing his temples. Mr. Gonzalez, while I sympathize with your position, family law prioritizes the child's relationship with their mother unless there is overwhelming evidence to suggest otherwise. Therefore, I am granting Mrs. Gonzalez full custody. There will be no alimony awarded. Mario's heart sank. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to remain calm as the gavel struck. Outside the courthouse, Grace approached Mario with a smug smile. Guess you didn't get what you wanted, did you? Mario turned to her, his expression calm but his voice steady with resolve. No, Grace, I didn't. But remember this, you might have Ricardo now, but you'll never be able to take my love for him away. And when he grows up and sees who we both really are, he'll know the truth. Grace faltered for a moment before walking away with Jose, who had been waiting by the steps. Mario stood there, watching them leave, his mind already racing with plans. He might have lost the battle, but the war wasn't over. He would be there for Ricardo, no matter what it took. It had been a week since Grace and Jose returned from their honeymoon in Hawaii. Mario knew this day would come, the day he'd have to drop Ricardo off at their house for his first visit. The thought gnawed at him, not because he wanted Grace back, but because he couldn't shake the feeling that Ricardo deserved better. A week after the divorce was final, Grace married Jose and moved in with Ricardo in Jose's house. She left for her honeymoon and left Ricardo with Mario. A week later, the drive to their house was quiet. Ricardo sat in the back seat, holding his favorite action figure. Mario glanced at him through the rearview mirror, his heart heavy. Mario drove up to Grace and Jose's new house, a pristine suburban mansion with a freshly mowed lawn that screamed of new beginnings. Mario turned to him with a soft smile. Stay in the car, champ. I won't be long, he said, ruffling Ricardo's hair. Okay, Dad, Ricardo replied, nodding obediently. Mario took a deep breath, stepping out of the car and walking up the driveway. The weight of everything Grace had put him through sat heavy on his chest, but he wasn't here to argue. He was here to finish things his way. Grace opened the door before he could knock. She looked different, happier, maybe, with an air of smugness that Mario couldn't ignore. You're late, she said curtly, glancing past him. Where's Ricardo? In the car, Mario said, his voice steady. I needed to talk to you first. Grace frowned. What is it, Mario? I don't have all day. Mario reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a crumpled lottery ticket, holding it up for her to see. Remember the night you told me about Jose? When you said you were leaving me? I bought this lottery ticket on the way home. Grace crossed her arms, rolling her eyes. So? You're here to tell me you've started gambling now? How typical. Mario ignored the jab, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. It's not just any ticket, Grace. This one is special. Go on, check it. Grace narrowed her eyes, snatching the ticket from his hand. She looked at the numbers printed on it and quickly pulled out her phone. Her fingers flew across the screen as she searched for the winning numbers. Mario stood there, hands in his pockets, watching her expression change. First, confusion, then disbelief, finally, shock. She looked up at him, her voice trembling. This is the winning ticket. $40 million. Mario's smile widened, his voice laced with calm sarcasm. Yep. Collected the money last week. Grace's eyes widened, and for a moment, her voice softened. Mario, you didn't tell me? We could have. Could have what? Mario interrupted, his tone cutting like a blade. Split it? Shared it? Sorry, Grace, I had a better idea. I donated every single penny to the Red Cross. Grace froze, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to find words. You donated it? Are you insane? You could have. Kept it and had to give you half? Mario finished for her, his voice calm but sharp. No thanks. I'd rather see that money do some good than let you or Jose touch a dime of it. Her face drained of color. You're bluffing. You didn't actually. Mario leaned in slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. Check with the Red Cross. They'll confirm it for you. Grace's breathing grew shallow, her hand gripping the doorframe for support. You're lying. Tell me you're lying. Mario tilted his head, his smile unwavering. Believe what you want, Grace. It's done. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a son to take care of. Grace's face twisted in panic. She took a shaky step back, clutching her chest. She began. But her voice faltered as her knees buckled. Mario watched her crumble, collapsing onto the floor in a heap. For a moment, he stood there, his face unreadable. Then he turned and walked away, leaving the ticket fluttering on the doorstep. As he reached the car, Ricardo looked up at him, concern in his young eyes. Dad, is everything okay? Mario smiled warmly, opening the car door and sliding into the driver's seat. Yeah, champ. Everything's fine. Let's go home. He started the car, pulling out of the driveway without a backward glance. The phone rang that evening as Mario was finishing dinner with Ricardo. The sound startled him out of his thoughts, but when he saw the caller ID, Grace's father, he knew it wasn't going to be good news. Mario, the older man's voice trembled, barely holding itself together. It's Grace. She's gone. Mario froze, his fork hovering midair. What do you mean, gone? She had a massive stroke. It happened earlier this evening, Grace's father said, his voice breaking. The doctors couldn't save her. Mario put the fork down, leaning back in his chair. A strange mixture of shock and detachment washed over him. I'm sorry to hear that, he said carefully, unsure of what else to say. There was a pause, and then Grace's father asked, Mario, did you say anything to her? Anything that might have upset her? Mario raised an eyebrow, surprised by the accusation. What? No, I didn't say anything that would have upset her. She told me you were there earlier to drop Ricardo off. Did you argue with her? Grace's father pressed. Mario sighed, gripping the phone tightly. Look, she wanted me to take Ricardo back with me for another week because she said she wanted more time with Jose. I reminded her about her heart condition, the doctor's warnings, everything. She didn't want to hear it. And Jose? Grace's father asked, his tone laced with frustration. I tried to talk to him about it, Mario replied, but he wasn't interested in hearing anything from me. Maybe he thought I was just trying to meddle in their lives. I don't know. There was a long pause before Mario added, almost too bluntly, maybe too much sex killed her. She wasn't listening to anyone, and neither was he. The line went silent for a moment, and then Grace's father muttered, Damn it, I told her. I told her she was overdoing it. The conversation ended soon after, but that was far from the end of it. A few days later, Mario heard through the grapevine that Grace's father had filed a complaint against Jose, accusing him of causing Grace's death by ignoring her doctor's recommendations and having too much sex with Grace. He even attached the medical advice that had explicitly warned Grace to avoid stress, physical or emotional, due to her heart condition. Mario couldn't help but chuckle darkly when he heard the news. Well, this just keeps getting better, he muttered to himself. Jose, who had once been so smug about marrying Grace, was now under investigation. The media caught wind of the unusual case, and Jose's reputation took a significant hit. Mario stayed out of it, focusing on Ricardo and his own life. One evening, Mario's phone buzzed with a text message from an unfamiliar number. Jose, I know why you wished me luck, Mario. Grace made the honeymoon hell. I could not have sex with her even for a single day. She drained me with her words so much that by the time she took me to bed I was mentally exhausted. I should have seen it coming. I wanted to run away every single day. I screwed up marrying her. Mario stared at the message for a moment before smirking. He didn't bother replying. A week later, Mario heard that Jose had sold the house and left the city. No one knew where he went, and frankly, Mario didn't care. All that mattered was that Ricardo was safe, and the chaos Grace had brought into their lives was finally over. Mario leaned back in his chair, his hands resting on the wooden armrests, gripping them tightly as the memory resurfaced. He had been calm, eerily so, on that fateful day when Grace had thrown her betrayal in his face. Her smugness, her callousness, her sheer disregard for the life they'd built together had ignited something inside him. That night, as he sat in his garage, staring at the crumpled remnants of his world, an idea took root. He had bought a lottery ticket the day everything fell apart, but it wasn't a winner, not even close. Yet the thought of Grace, a woman who had torn him apart with such cruelty, benefiting from anything he earned or won, made his blood boil. He had spent hours at his computer, carefully crafting the deception. He downloaded images of a winning ticket, studying the fonts, the colors, every minute detail. Using Photoshop, he meticulously altered his own ticket to match the winning numbers. It was flawless, a ticket that could fool anyone, even Grace. The plan wasn't about money. It was about something deeper, something darker. Mario replayed that scene in his mind, the way he had waved the ticket in front of her like a magician, revealing the final act of an illusion. He remembered the way her expression had shifted, from irritation to shock, and then to pure disbelief. She had fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling as she checked the numbers online. Her face had turned pale as she stared at the screen, how she clutched her chest and how she collapsed on the ground, and how effortlessly he walked away from her without a hint of pity or remorse. Mario exhaled deeply, running a hand over his face. He had known her heart condition was precarious. He had known the shock could kill her. And yet, in that moment, as she lay on the floor, he hadn't felt guilt. He had felt free. Was it wrong? The question lingered in the air, But Mario didn't dwell on it for long. Grace's choices had destroyed their family, had hurt their son, and had nearly broken him. Her death, while tragic, was the culmination of her own actions, or at least, that's what he told himself. He looked out at Ricardo, who was now drawing pictures with chalk on the driveway. The boy deserved a peaceful, happy life, free from the chaos his mother had brought into their home. For Mario, the ticket had been nothing more than a tool, a final act to sever the toxic hold Grace had on their lives. And now, with her gone and Jose out of the picture, Mario felt like he could finally breathe again. He stood up, walking over to Ricardo and ruffling the boy's hair. "Come on, champ," he said with a smile. "Let's go get some ice cream." As they drove off, Mario glanced at his son in the rearview mirror. This time, he wasn't just moving forward. He was leaving the past behind, for good. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.